Hey guys, welcome back to the Glory Living channel. My name is Hannah, and today we are talking about whether you should be growing fruit in containers. Okay, let's check it out. There are pros and cons to growing fruit trees in containers, and I want to go through some of those today, but I want to show you what you can grow in containers. Some of those are smaller, some of those are bigger, but you know what? You can grow a lot in containers, more than you think you can. Last year, I purchased several fruit trees because we had the money to be able to do it, and I wanted to get them started before we were able to find land. This meant about 3 apple trees, 2 pear trees, a peach tree, a cherry tree I got on accident, and adding to that, I have fig trees, raspberry bushes, blueberries, strawberries, grapes, all being grown in containers, and they're thriving. Like growing fruit in the ground, you're still gonna have to fight off pests and diseases. That's something I still have to do in the containers, but guys, everything is doing really, really well. We've gotten strawberries from planting them earlier this year. We have blueberries that are just thriving in their containers, and we even have trees with apples growing on them. We'll see how big they get with the smaller container. But I want to tell you some of the pros and cons of growing in containers and why we're doing it. We do not own land. I wanted to get fruit trees established and not have to wait until we were ever able to own enough land to plant them. Now, I wasn't sure whether that was a good idea. It was somewhat of an experiment, but I figured they wouldn't die in the containers. And not only have they not died, but they've actually done really well. So there are benefits of growing in containers. We're doing it because we don't have land, and that's the best way for us to do it. If you have land, would I rather grow them in the ground? Yeah, I'd absolutely rather grow them in the ground. But there are actually some fruit that it's really good to start off in containers if you can, especially if you get them at a small size. Okay, so like these blueberries that I have behind me, I got them very, very young. They were ordered to be between 4 to 10 inches tall, but they were super affordable. I mean, like $3 or $4 a plant. So I have 20 of them behind me. That is a great bush to establish in a container, especially when you're getting it that small. I'm not saying you have to, but for that small, it really helps it to be established in a container, get a little larger, and then put it in the ground. Now, it's not totally necessary, but it's helpful. The same with the figs as well. We have some fig trees that we're growing in the front, 2 that are doing great, 1 that we might have accidentally bought dead, which that's like a lesson for another day. We have 3 fig trees up there, and I'm really happy to have them in containers now, let them get a little bit bigger, and then put them in the ground. Keeping them contained will help them throw energy into the actual plant. Figs love to send out roots and not establish their plant as much as their roots. So for figs, that's a great thing to grow them in containers first. So like I'm saying, that can be a benefit of getting a plant established in a container first. That's one pro to growing fruit in containers. Another benefit is the space. I can grow all of this in a smaller area because they don't need room to establish their roots. If I was growing them in the ground, I'd want them more spaced out. But because they're in their own containers, that allows me to grow them in a smaller space. We don't have a ton of room in our rental house, yet I am growing around 80 plants of fruit. Because I have my fruit trees in containers, I can have them a foot apart and it doesn't matter because they are in containers. Now, that does bring to some of the cons that comes from growing in containers. One of the cons of growing in containers is that you do have to fertilize. When you think about this, the nutrition that plant has accessible to it is restricted to anything that's in the container, and that's it. So unless you are bringing nutrients in, it can't get them naturally from the ground, whether that's from anything decomposing around it or whether you're adding things yearly. There's just more access to nutrients in the ground than there are in the container. So if you want to grow them in containers, you're gonna have a schedule of fertilizing your plants. So that might be every couple of weeks that you make a compost tea or a fertilizer tea, and that's really not that complicated. It's pretty easy. You're just gonna mix either compost or a fertilizer in water, 24 hours, let it sit, and water your plants. That's gonna give them the nutrients that they need in order to grow fruit, because it takes a lot of nutrients for them to be able to produce fruit, and if they don't have enough, the fruit will either fall off or the tree will start looking really sad. I have trees behind me that have several fruit on with our peach tree and also our apple tree, but they can only do so much if I don't feed them, so I need to be consistent with that. Otherwise, these fruit are never gonna make it. Along the same lines, constant watering. It is good to have a habit of watering your plants, especially as the heat of the summer kicks in. When it's colder, they don't need as much. They're not as needy. But as that heat kicks in, you're gonna wanna be watering them, maybe even every day. If you are really not good at keeping on plants, container growing can be kind of difficult because you do have to make sure that you're maintaining them with water and nutrition, like fertilizing them. But it really has its benefits. Those are the only cons that I can really think of growing them. I will say that as far as size, you do have to continue to get the container bigger depending on what you're trying to grow. My fruit trees were only ever supposed to be in here temporarily. Now they've probably got a couple more years in containers, unfortunately, which is more than I was kind of hoping for or planning for, but I'm not all that worried about it. You can get 25-gallon containers on Amazon and I can move them up to that next year. Right now they're in 10-gallon containers and I'll just use these 10-gallon containers for my other plants next year. But that is with fruit trees. See guys, everything else that I'm growing can be grown in smaller containers. My blueberries are in 2-gallon buckets. There's a few that are in 5, and most of my strawberries are in 2-gallon buckets, and they're all thriving. I have raspberries in 5-gallon buckets, and I have grapes in 5-gallon buckets, and everything is really happy. I want to show you how these are doing because guys, they really are happy, and I'm sharing this video because I know what it's like to be frustrated and want to be able to have land, a house, or whatever, and not be in a season of life where that is really doable. But if you love to garden and you want to grow some of your own food, it doesn't mean that you're totally stuck. If you have the amount of space that we have, which still isn't much, but enough to utilize this, you really can grow a lot. Year 2 of growing these fruit trees, and we already have them producing fruit. Our apples are producing, our peaches are producing. We would have had more pears if it weren't for those stinky squirrels. But everything's doing great. Our strawberries are doing wonderful. Our blueberries have blueberries on them. We shouldn't have let that happen, but it's hard to really pinch off berries off of a plant when you're so excited about them. Our raspberries, I mean, raspberries are like growing weeds, you know? They're just weeds that like to feed you delicious berries because they are so vigorous. If I can do it, you can do it. They love growing in containers. It can be done. Please guys, whatever you do not let your current circumstances stop you from taking steps into what you want and what you want to do. If you are not living where you want to live, but yet you really want to garden, do not let that hold you back. There are so many creative ways to grow vertically, to grow in containers. I really believe that anyone, anywhere can really grow a beautiful garden. And you know what? Some people think you either are good or you aren't good. You know, at gardening, you either like get a green thumb or a black thumb, but that is just not true. It is simply a skill that takes practice, and every year you get better. I have a good friend who is 92 years old, and when I tell her I have so much to learn about gardening, she always tells me, oh, me too, I'm still learning. If that gives you any encouragement for a woman who's been doing it for decades, it's always a learning process, and that's the same that will come with growing fruit in containers. There are going to be some wins, there are going to be some losses, but it is possible. And you know what? There are great fruit that are made for growing in containers, and even trees that are made for containers. Not just lemons and limes and citruses that can do well in smaller containers, but even apple trees that are column apple trees that are meant to be grown in containers and just grow in small spaces. There's so much you can do. Don't be afraid to do some research and find what works best for you. But I'm telling you, I have all sorts of varieties that are just flourishing in these containers. I suppose only time will tell whether it was a mistake to do the fruit trees in the containers once I finally am able to transplant them into the ground. But as far as I can see what they're doing now, they're flourishing in the containers, and I can only think that they'll be happier and grow larger in the ground. So guys, I definitely say thumbs up, give it a try. You know, as gardening becomes more popular, there's more of a market for it and people can sell things at higher prices. And so since gardening is kind of booming and has been for a few years, raised bed gardens can seem expensive, but you don't have to grow in a raised bed. You can grow in very inexpensive, if not free, containers and get good soil. It doesn't even have to be amazing soil, just anything you can get your hands on, and grow food in your own home. Grow fruit, grow vegetables. Don't just limit yourself to really small things. You can actually grow some pretty large plants in containers. So guys, I hope this video is encouraging to you. What I really want to do is just encourage others to step out and to try new things like I'm trying, and you never know what you're going to be blessed with. Guys, thanks for watching this video. I hope it was helpful to you. Please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and until next time, we'll see you soon.